Hey, everybody. I am Mike. I am joined by the best sports writer in the world, Joe Posnanski, who has just published, let's get this in here, Why We Love Baseball, A History in 50 Moments. Another fantastic book, Joe. Thank you for joining me.
Absolutely. Great to be here.
I've been reading your work for, I want to say 15 years or so, and I don't read the football stuff as much, but I read everything you put out on baseball, especially. You have a very unique way of distilling statistics down and telling stories that anybody can relate to. And I appreciate that. I've worked in data analytics for 15 years and it's a really difficult skill to get. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you for saying that. It's a lot of fun for me. It's a lot of fun for me to sort of see new statistics, try to figure out what they mean and what stories they tell. Because that's, I mean, this being in data analytics particularly. I mean, a statistic only, it doesn't work on its own merits, right? It
Right.
works because it leads to a greater understanding. It leads to storytelling. It leads to a deeper appreciation of something in baseball. And I love following that path.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So you've been 2 years on your own on Joe Blogs, right? I think you just
Yeah,
hit 2 years, if I remember correctly.
that's right.
You were kind of all over the place for a few years before that. I started reading the Baseball 100 on the Athletic,
Right.
and then got my own copy. And you're, uh, I'm sure you're sick of it. I've seen several interviews this week where people are raving about your writing and this book, but it's just so good. And my audience is all, I would say, 90% plus baseball fans and vintage baseball card collectors who
Yeah.
love these old stories. And so, what? Tell me about the process of this book and how. I haven't read the whole thing yet, but there are some things in there that I'd never heard of before, and I'm very familiar with the history of baseball.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that was the goal. The goal was to really mix what is very, very familiar, stories that everybody knows, hopefully told in a new way, right? But Willie Mays' catch and Kirk Gibson's homer and the shot heard around the world and all of that, with a bunch of stories and a bunch of little moments that maybe hardly anybody knows, and that I didn't know when I started. And for me, this book, it ended up being super personal. And I've thought a lot about that because I mean, in it doesn't seem like it would necessarily be any more personal than traveling around the country with Buck O'Neill or the Baseball 100, where it was always my selections of the greatest players ever, and Houdini is even more of a journey for me. So I've thought a lot about during this crazy couple of weeks since the book came out why this book felt so personal to me, and I think it's because when you're writing about moments, I mean, one, I write about moments that mean a lot to me personally, but two, I think when you're writing about moments, you have an infinite choice selection, right? Like, I mean, you're writing the 100 greatest players. I think anybody's list would contain 50, 60, 70 of those, right? No matter who it is. And then you're arguing a lot about the last 30 or 40 or whatever, but moments could be anything. And so I with each moment, you ask about the process, with each moment, I ask myself that question, is this why we love baseball? Is this moment capture what it is that we love about baseball? And so the huge moments that are in this book, I think very much do, but these much smaller moments that maybe people don't know, or maybe people know but don't, like I don't know that people would necessarily expect to see Bartolo Colon's home run in this book, right? Things like that. But when the only question is this why we love baseball? You realize that the Bartolo Colon home run is not only in the book, it's one of the truly great moments in baseball history. And the ball hitting off the head of Jose Canseco and so on and so on. So that was the whole process. The whole process for me was I had hundreds of moments, and I asked myself, is this moment really capture why we love baseball in a way that's different from all the other moments in this book? And you just kind of keep going and going, and at the end of the day, you've got a book.
Yeah. This morning I read the chapter about Ron Necciai. Am I pronouncing that right?
That's right.
Necciai. I had never heard of him before, and it's such a great story.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah. I
s-
mean, uh, again, it was one of those. It's like it seems like probably when I was a kid, I saw it like in a comic book or or in one of those can you believe it things in the newspaper. There's a guy who struck out 27 batters in a game, um, but I didn't connect to it. Like, I mean, it was somewhere in the recesses of my mind. But then it's like when you're doing the moments, you start looking and looking and go, oh my gosh, Ron Necciai struck out 27 batters in a game, and then as it turned out, I had a connection to Necciai through a friend of mine, and it ended up being one of my favorite chapters to write. And a lot of people have come up to me about that one in particular because like you, like they'd never heard of it, not even in passing. And I mean, this is one of the, I mean, it's something people talk about, like, oh, what would it, how amazing would it be if somebody struck out all 27 batters? And he didn't strike out, as you'll see in the book, he didn't strike out all 27 batters. It's a bit of a convoluted way to 27. But it's a 9 inning game, 27 strikeouts, and every out in the game was a strikeout. And he himself had a great story. He was a phenom who eventually kind of got hurt a little bit and never became the star that they thought he was going to be. But he himself had a great story.
yeah. I will inevitably now get comments from viewers who say, "How could you have never heard of Ron Necciai?" Because I
Yeah,
have a lot of viewers who are quiet historians of the game.
of
I have
course.
one guy who constantly gets a sub 5 on Immaculate Grid,
Wow.
and you got a 5, which is remarkable. I've never
Yeah.
gotten under 40, maybe.
Yeah, yeah. I've got a whole new thing with Immaculate Grid. So I'm my podcast partner, Mike Schur, uh, basically decided it's been a couple of months now, probably. He's like, I'm sick of going for rarity. I'm going
Yeah,
for speed. I'm giving
yeah.
myself 3 minutes and I'll do the most obvious ones. I don't care. I just want to complete it in 3 minutes. So I've started doing that. And it's become more enjoyable for me to do it that. Like I can think of today's, I don't even know what my rarity score, but there's a real enjoyment to say, oh, Yankees 3,000 hits rather than trying to think of like, all right, what 3,000 hit guy played like 4 games with the Yankees or something, right? It says like, hey, Derek Jeter, that's it. It's super. It's over. I don't have to think about it anymore. And so there's
I did Dave Winfield.
yeah, Dave Winfield. It's just a very, I like sort of no longer trying to think of obscurity. And look, if I come up with one, I happen to know that Bo Diaz played for both Cleveland and Cincinnati in today's. So that was like a .05 or something. I happen to know that, but unless it comes to the surface now, I'm done trying to beat the. I figure, I got my 5 or whatever it was, and I'm done with the rarities.
Speaking of Mike Schur, since you brought him up, you can now tell him that you were interviewed by a guy wearing a "Hot fruit is disgusting" T-shirt.
Oh, well, if I'd known that, I wouldn't even have come on. The guy had no idea that was going to happen.
Yeah,
Um, no, Mike will be very pleased. He'll be very pleased to know that.
yeah, I know he will. I've followed him since the Fire Joe Morgan days.
Yes, yes,
Before we knew it was Mike Schur.
that's right. That's
Yeah.
absolutely right. That's how we met.
Oh, really?
Yeah, yeah. He wrote something about a friend of mine. Just tore apart some article
That was
that
what they did.
that's all they did. That was their job. And he tore apart an article a friend of mine had written, and not a close friend. And the friend totally deserved it. It was a terrible article, and he everything he wrote in it was true. but it was disturbingly true. And I sent him a note saying, "You don't know me, but I read your article today. I know that guy who wrote that. Totally deserved. You absolutely nailed him. But please, please, please don't ever do this to me, because I will never be able to leave the house if you do this to me. Don't I don't have the confidence to overcome that." And he wrote back, said he was a big fan, and the next time I was in LA, we should get together. Next time I was in LA, we got together, and that was 15 years ago now, and so we've been friends ever since. But yeah, it started off purely out of fear. That was all I was
Yeah.
doing, was just don't do this to me.
Yeah. That's great. So you're a big Kansas City Royals guy.
I was in Kansas City for a long time. Yes.
Yeah. We'll do at the end of this. We'll do a little lightning round Kansas City Royals trivia.
Ooh.
See how much you can get right. I suspect you'll get
If
much
it's
of it.
if it's in my time period, I'll get it. Before or after my time in Kansas City, I might not get it.
Yeah. So I focus on baseball cards
Of
here,
course.
mostly, and sports cards. You can see I've got a Bob Cousy behind me, a Hakeem Elijah one. Are
Love
you
it.
familiar with the current sports card market?
Somewhat, largely because of Mike. Mike has
Yeah.
become such a card nerd. He's really filled me in on a lot of stuff, and he crosses a lot. It I don't doesn't do that much football, but it's certainly a lot of baseball, but also a lot of basketball. And so I keep up a little bit. I don't buy a lot of stuff, but I do buy some things here and there. And there was a time, just on the most basic of levels, where I wanted to have every top set. Like, I would always buy a top set so I could
Yeah.
have those through the years. But not as familiar with all of the variations and things that are going on, and the one of ones and all of that sort of thing. But it's amazing. I mean, it's really become this. Like, I was a pretty big card guy in the 80s, like when it first started exploding. Like, I was one of those guys who collected rookie cards, and really went, tried to predict, and ended up with 57 Corey Snyder rookie cards that ended up being worthless, and so on and so on and so on. So that was sort of thing. But then later, I mean, it's now just a lot more complicated. So I've dipped my toe in it, but that's pretty much where I've been.
I'm from Maine, live in Maine my whole life, and Corey Snyder, I think, played for the Maine Guides
That sounds right. That
in
sounds
the
right. I might
80s.
even have a Main Guides Corey Snyder card. I
Oh,
think they might have done a set, because
yeah,
I have some minor league Corey Snyder cards. I was very, very into Corey Snyder. I grew up in Cleveland, and that Cleveland team looked like they were for real, and Snyder looked like he was going to be a big star. It didn't work out that way. Didn't work out well either for the team or for Corey Snyder particularly. But yeah, he was. I believe he was a Main guy. That sounds right.
there was a Sports Illustrated cover featuring Corey Snyder and Joe Carter.
Joe Carter and
I
the
think it
Wahoo
said,
and Wahoo, all of them smiling.
"That's
Big
right." And
Wahoo behind them. Corey
yeah,
Snyder, Joe Carter, big smiles, and it says, "Believe it, Cleveland is the best team in the American League." That was the headline. They were the worst team. They ended up being the worst team in the American League that year. That was 1987, which is very hard to do. It's very, very hard to predict that a team is going to be the best team and have them actually be the worst team. I mean, you're a data analyst, you know what the stat possibilities are of that happening. But in Cleveland, it was fully expected. That's sort of the whole history of Cleveland baseball.
yeah. Joe Carter's baseball reference war is one of the more surprising to me. As a child, I thought Joe Carter was a superstar,
Yeah,
Hall of Famer, and his war, off the top of my head, is sub 20.
sub 20. Didn't get on base. That was
Yeah,
basically it. I mean, it was not. He At the time that he played, especially when he was a younger guy, it seemed like he was pretty good defensively. Uh, War does not see him that way. But the big thing is, I mean, sub 300 on base
yeah,
percentages. He just didn't walk, just did not walk. But he drove in runs like a crazy. I mean, like he's got as many 100 RBI seasons as a bunch of like literal like Joe DiMaggio, and I mean DiMaggio is not a fair one, but like a bunch of very very famous and top end sluggers. Joe Carter has as many 100 RBI seasons as those guys. That's what he did. He drove in lots and lots of runs, and of course hit one of the most famous home runs in baseball history in the book, and and was a great guy. He still is. He was a great guy. I know him a little bit, but he didn't walk, so that doesn't help your war when you just don't get on base.
Yeah, yeah. You recently wrote about Bill James's 10-tier Hall of Fame proposal, and I tried finding it on his website because you said he had just written about it. I couldn't find it anywhere, and I ended up. So I do a bi-weekly series with another YouTuber, and we talked about that. And we, I get a lot of hate when I talk about the Hall of Fame because I did a video about I don't think Jack Morris should be a Hall of Famer.
Right.
And man, people get so mad. Do you get a lot of comments from people when you say this person shouldn't be a Hall of Famer or this person won't make the Hall of Fame?
I was very much in the Jack Morris bubble for years because there was that fairly long stretch period of time, 4 or 5 years, where Jack Morris and Burt Blyleven were both on the ballot, and Jack Morris was getting way more support, and Burt Blyleven was a way better pitcher.
Way better.
And so I kind of, especially back then, I was I tried to be a lot less caustic about that sort of thing, because I mean, what struck me is like, just because I don't think they belong in the Hall of Fame doesn't mean I don't think they were a really really good player, right?
Exactly.
I really really felt it when Harold Baines got in the Hall of Fame. There is no doubt in my mind Harold Baines does not belong in the Hall of Fame by the standards of the Hall of Fame.
38 WAR.
38 WAR, and was never really a star, was never an MVP candidate. I mean, he was a very good hitter, and he was a DH. He didn't play in the field. And he was a very good hitter. That's all. I mean, there are lots of those guys. But he was a good player. And so I didn't want to be like, bashing Harold. That's not right. Harold Baines was going to the Hall of Fame. It's not right to me to sit there and say it's horrible. And, so what? So, it's not, the Hall of Fame is filled with guys who are about the level of Harold Baines, if you go back in history. So there's no reason to single him out. So I've been a lot more careful about being fair, but also being like, well, I wouldn't vote for him, but that doesn't mean that, he's not a Hall of Famer. And Jack Morris is very much along those lines. I mean, Bulldog completed a bunch of games, never missed a start, started opening day, whatever, 8 times or something. Pitched, one of the greatest, if not the greatest, World Series Game 7s for sure, ever. And he's in the Hall of Fame. There are guys I would have put in before him, but he's in the Hall of Fame, and that's sort of the way I look at it. I don't look at it like, people always ask me, because I write a lot about the Hall of Fame, as you probably know, and people always ask me, like, who would you throw out of the Hall of Fame? Like, instead of who would you add? Like, I would want Dwight Evans to be in the Hall of Fame. I would want there are a bunch of guys like that I think belong in the Hall of Fame. Yeah, there you
Dwight
go.
Evans rookie card autographed.
Absolutely. And he absolutely should be in the Hall of Fame. But I wouldn't throw anybody out to get him in there. I think everybody who's in the Hall of Fame, there's a reason they're in the Hall of Fame. They were very, very good players. No, there's not a bad player in the Hall of Fame. So that's sort of the way I view it now.
So you think Dwight Evans should be? What about Louis Tiant?
Yeah, definitely. Louis Tiant, the one I've always compared him to is Catfish Hunter. Yeah. And to me, Louis Tiant is very, very clearly a greater career than Catfish Hunter. But Catfish Hunter got into the Hall of Fame because he retired 3 years earlier or something like that, 2 or 3 years earlier. And because of that, he caught the wave. He got into the middle of a period of time before, that historic run of 300-game winners, before Seaver and Perry and Carlton and Don Sutton and Necro, like that whole group, plus guys that were close to 300 wins like Fergie Jenkins. there were 6 or 7 all-timers that kind of came up at the same time, and Louis Tiant got washed away by those guys. But Catfish Hunter, because he retired 3 years earlier, he got into the Hall of Fame before those guys appeared on the ballot. So it was a pure timing thing. So yeah, absolutely. Louis Tiant belongs in the Hall of Fame for many reasons, including the fact he was one of the great characters in baseball history. And so yeah, Tiant is a big guy that I would want in the Hall of Fame. Dwight Evans. I'm trying to think of some of the others that I'm a Murphy guy. I'm a Dale Murphy guy. And I think it's a lot of the arguments
Mattingly.
close. I mean, I'm more of a Murphy guy than a Mattingly guy, just because Mattingly's career was so short.
Yeah.
Mattingly at his peak was absolutely a Hall of Famer. But it's I mean, I also realize that the line has to be drawn somewhere, and there's always going to be people on the wrong side of the line that you're like, hey, that person was a really, really good player and is better than some of the other players that are in the hall. So it's a tough game, but the guys that I think Dwight Evans, Lou Whitaker are the two that I put at the very, very top of my list. I think it's absurd that Dwight Evans is not in the Hall of Fame when Jim Rice is. I mean, they were absolute. And people in Boston, you're up in New England, people in Boston would insist to the end that Jim Rice was better than Dwight Evans, and there's just no way. I just don't see it. And then Louis Tiant, right, and Lou Whitaker, by the way, should have gone into the Hall of Fame the same year as Alan Trammell, and that was a very, very big missed opportunity in my view. But absolutely should be in the Hall of Fame. And by the way, I think both of them will get in. I just think it's sort of we're in the cycle right now, but I think eventually they'll get in.
Yeah. Let's play the prediction game. Where will Shohei sign, and how quickly will it be the Yankees?
I don't actually believe he's going to sign with the Yankees, but maybe that's just because I don't want that to happen so badly. I think he's a West Coast guy. I think it's Dodgers or Seattle. I mean, those are the teams that make the most sense to me. The Yankees don't exactly fit anyway. I mean, they'd have to DH him. It means they have to figure out him. They'd have to probably just dump Stanton and pay out his contract. Maybe they're willing to do that and pay Shohei $500 million. But that's, that organization, that's not George Steinbrenner running that team anymore. I'm not sure how much they'd want to do it. Seattle seems like a very, that's Ichiro and such a strong Asian, connection and a very cool city and on the West Coast. That feels interesting to me. The Dodgers, if they're willing to just, go to the wall, that's a super interesting place. Those are the ones that feel, I mean, I saw Peter Gammon's report the other day that the Red Sox could get involved. That doesn't feel real to me, but I don't know. Nobody knows. Nobody knows what is inside Shohei. Nobody knows what he's actually thinking about. I mean, I guess the Red Sox made some sense because of their connection to the New Balance CEO, and Shohei's a big New Balance guy and all of that. But I don't know. Feels to me like West Coast, though. It feels to me.
Yeah. I'm at a point in my life. I'm 44. I went through the Red Sox have won World Series now. I'm more interested because the playoffs are such a crapshoot in baseball.
Yeah.
I'm more interested in being entertained. And Shohei, I think, would be wildly entertaining. I would love it if the Red Sox signed him.
Of course.
But I don't think they have a chance.
I don't, it doesn't seem like that's a fit for him. But I mean, again, I don't know that anybody knows exactly. Like if Shohei came out through an interpreter tomorrow and said, I'm signing with the Red Sox because I've idolized Ted Williams all my life, all of us would be like, well, I didn't know that. But I mean, okay, because Shohei has kept everything so close to the vest. I mean, he's been very, very, quiet about those kinds of things. Um, so I don't know. Again, all we can do, and all we will do, is we speculate for the next month, 6 months about what he's going to go. Um, Sort of guess, and it sort of feels to me like he likes it on the West Coast, and it sort of feels like he's connected to, like his hero would have probably been Ishiro, and it just feels like maybe that feels like a passing of the torch, or but it might be 100% wrong. It might be completely. Look, he might just sign with Kansas City and just go, you know what? I've always loved the Royals. I love that song. I mean, like, who the heck even knows what he's really thinking?
Yeah. That's a good segue to lightning round
Right?
of little Kansas City Royals trivia.
Let's try.
Start easy. Oh, actually, let's go back to baseball cards for a moment, because
Yes.
I meant to mention the baseball card industry right now is driven largely by grading. So a
Yes.
company called PSA grades cards.
Of course.
A George Brett rookie, 1975 tops, and it graded a 9 by PSA, sells for about $5,000.
Okay.
How much do you think, just wild guess, would a 10 sell for?
Okay. So Mike and I have had a sort of vivid conversations about this, and he has told me point blank the number you start with is 10x. So I'm going to guess $50,000.
More than $100,000.
See, that's 20x. That's crazy.
Yeah, it's especially vintage because the 10s are so rare.
Oh, in 75. You mean going back? They're so rare.
Yeah. Yeah.
Are there even 10s? Like I've sort of been interested in the whole grading thing, and I realize that there's probably a lot of ins and outs that I don't understand. Obviously, 10s have to be, the rarity is important and everything else. But like, are there even 10s going back to the 50s? Like, is there a Mickey Mantle 10? Is there
Three of them
there's 352 Mantles that are called 10s.
that are 10s in PSA. And then
Okay.
there's another company called SGC that has their Mint Plus is a 9.5.
Oh,
And there's one of those, and last summer it sold for $12.6 million.
12.6 million. Yeah, that sounds about right. I
Yeah,
thought about
pocket
buying
change.
that. I thought about getting that myself, but I was like, not a huge Mantle fan, so I'll let it pass. Yeah, it's fascinating to me. And here's what I don't fully understand, and it's probably more true for like a 75 card, like the Brett rookie, but like in more recent vintage cards, the difference between a 9 and a 10, is that even perceptible by the average
Nope.
person? Right?
Nope.
It's nothing. It's
No,
like there's no way you could even tell the difference.
that's right. Yeah. So I collect low grade, especially in the 1950s. You can see I've got like a Ted Williams back there, a Hank Aaron. They're low grade. They're ones and twos and threes because they're cheaper and it's the same card. And
Right.
you can get high quality low grade cards that are well centered. They have a little paper loss on the back, and I don't even care about that.
Yeah.
And I'm spending $150 for the card instead of $15,000.
See, that makes so much sense to me. I would want, like, there have been times that I've wanted to collect like a good card for every person in the baseball 100. I had a guy the other day tell me that he's building a baseball 100, um, like 100 sheets, 9 cards of each player,
Hmm.
and he was saying that his real problem was that there are not 9 cards of Oscar Charleston, or some of the
Yep.
Smokey Joe Williams or whatever. But I thought about like building that, and I thought if I did that, I'd want to get like I wouldn't want to get like a modern,
Right. You want a
you know,
playing days
I
card.
want a playing days card, and I'd want to do it, and I wouldn't care that much about the grade. Like I'd
Yeah.
want to get probably a low grade. So maybe I could do it for a somewhat reasonable amount of money. I don't know. Probably
Yeah.
not for like the Ruths and Garrett and those kinds of things.
The
But
Ruth
how
playing
low
days
grade those
cards.
are, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, they're outrageous. So, Kansas City Royals, we're going to
Yeah.
start easy,
Okay.
and then they're going to get progressively harder.
No.
Number one, super easy. Highest war. And all my war questions are baseball reference. So, highest war in Kansas City Royals history.
Oh, George Brett. George
Yeah.
Brett's got to be the highest one.
89. How about highest pitcher war?
Highest pitcher WAR for the Royals could be tricky because it's got to be a guy who stayed with the Royals. So it's not going to be Zach, or it's going to be probably Kevin Appier.
That's right. 47. Good job. Another easy one. Most saves as a Royal.
Most saves as a Royal. Let's say Jeff Montgomery.
That's right. 304.
How about that?
Stolen bases.
It's got to be Willie Wilson. Willie Wilson's got to be the most stolen bases.
612.
Nice.
A little trickier. Lowest ERA.
Oh, 1,000 innings minimum or something, or
there are a lot of innings for this pitcher.
Okay, a lot of innings.
2.55.
Ooh, 2.55 ERA for a lot of innings.
I'm going to look up this pitcher. He threw. Most of his career was with Kansas City, and he had over 1,000 innings, but not all with Kansas City.
Okay. That's
895 with Kansas City.
That's a tricky one. 2.55. So it's probably, well, if he had over 1,000 innings, he's probably not a reliever. I'm going to say it is
this person never started a game, but pitched the same number of innings at this time as a lot of starters pitch now.
Oh. Quiz. Of course it is. Like
right.
that was easy. Quiz is one of my all-time favorites. And an incredibly wonderful person. And I was thinking starter, so I just kind of left him off. But as soon as you said he never started a game, I'm like, oh, yeah, of course, Quiz.
Yeah, he was throwing 130 innings a season.
Oh, he was incredible. Yeah, I mean, look, I think, speaking of Hall of Fame, like I think there's a very powerful case to make for him for the Hall of Fame that I have made numerous times, because he was every bit as good, if not even a little bit better, than Bruce Sutter. And you compare those two careers, Sutter's in the Hall of Fame. He had more saves, but he got a lot of those saves when he was with Atlanta and was not pitching very well anymore. Quisenberry never had that second act that he did. But in their primes, they were absurdly comparable, and maybe even a little touch better. Quiz.
Yeah, 4 straight years finishing second or third in Cy Young.
Yeah.
The best defensive WAR.
Best defensive WAR could be Frank White.
You got it. 22.
There we go.
Now, this is a surprise to me. These next two are the same player. Best average and best on-base percentage as a Royal. This person played 3 seasons for the Royals in the 90s.
He played 3 seasons for the Royals and has the best batting average and best on-base percentage.
Yep.
That's going to be a tough one. I'm going to say, all right, give me his position. Can you give me a position?
Outfielder.
An outfielder for the Royals.
Went to the Red Sox.
High batting average and on base percentage. He went to the Red. It was the 90s, because I've been thinking of there's no way that Johnny Damon had that good a batting average.
Damon. This person played from 96 to 98 for the Royals.
So it was right when I first got there. That was because I got to Kansas City in 96. I'm trying to think of those players in 96. And he went from there to the Red Sox. All right, I think you stumped me. Who we got?
Jose Offerman.
Oh, he was more of a second baseman than an outfielder. I guess maybe he was playing.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, I don't know why. I totally threw you off with that.
He threw you off on that. Yeah.
Sorry,
Jose Offerman, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Best slugging percentage, 518. Also made an appearance on a Seinfeld episode.
Oh, made an appearance on a Seinfeld episode. Yikes. Oh, no, that wouldn't be him. So Brett does not have the highest slugging percentage in the team history. All right, give me a time frame.
He played for Kansas City from 87 to 91.
That's Bo time. But
And
Bo,
then
it
went
wasn't
to the
Bo.
but then went to the Yankees, which is why he ended up on a Seinfeld episode.
Oh, okay. Oh, Danny Tartable.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then a weird one. I've never heard of this guy before. Most wins. This is the last question. Most wins in Kansas City Royals history.
Most wins is probably Alfred's more. I mean, why am I losing his name? He won 20 games like 3 or 4 years in a row. Dennis Leonard.
Paul Splitorf.
Oh, Paul Splittorff. Well, Paul, that's right. Paul was the announcer in Kansas City for years and years. He's passed away since then, but I knew Paul. Paul and Dennis Leonard were, I think, like back and forth for most wins. Good lefty. Paul Splittorff, just a solid pitcher.
Yeah, 166 wins, all with Kansas City.
Yeah, spent his whole career with the Royals.
Yeah.
Very good.
This was fun, Joe. I appreciate you coming on. Anybody obviously watching, I hope you all enjoyed this. I'm going to end this now. Hang out just for a second, Joe. And thanks everybody for watching.
Thank you.